It's a great pleasure. I'd like to thank all of you for joining the webinar today, which will be on a discussion on how to grow your business, how to make your design business flourish in today's somewhat difficult and different circumstances. The webinar will last for about 30 minutes, and then we'll allow some time afterwards for questions, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. If we don't get to them all, you can go after the webinar onto our support team, who will help you in the best way possible with any information that you might need. Having said all that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Alex Myers. I actually started or founded QC, for quality of course, in 1984. That was a long time ago. Back then we had no internet. Now I can welcome you all into my kitchen. I only wish I could make you all a real cup of coffee, and we can sit and chat perfectly comfortably and amiably together with the greatest of ease. In 1984, QC offered one course. Today, we have a range of many different courses which will allow you to concentrate and to hone your skills in just about any area of design or decorating that you are interested in working in. And indeed, we have courses in other related areas as well. So if you're interested in design and you want to look at redesign or staging or professional organizing, we're there for you. You can also look at things like professional makeup artistry, event and wedding planning. The world is really your oyster. So QC has changed a lot over the last 34 years that we've been around. But one thing that hasn't changed, I think, is the sort of QC mantra, quality of course. And we've tried to cleave very closely to that over the years. So our philosophy really is that, yes, of course, you will get wonderful course materials which are constantly revised and updated so that they're very much the latest of what we can offer. Yes, of course, you will get excellent full business training so that you feel comfortable and confident about moving into the field and working in the field. Yes, we will offer unparalleled support to you, both by our tutors and by our wonderful support team with any questions or problems you have while you're taking the course, and indeed sometimes for many years after you've completed the course. Once you're in the QC family, we want you to stay with us. We want you to be with us. And speaking of our support team, who are great people, you may decide that you want to chat to them after the webinar, because I'm about to tell you about a wonderful bundle of promotions that we have associated with the webinar today. And after the presentation is finished, you can go online to the support team. They're all there waiting to hear from you. You can join them by email, by live chat. You can telephone them. You might get through to Heather, who's our leader of the team, who's our sort of den mother, or you might get through to Andrew, who's our resident cool dude. Whoever you speak to will try to help you in the very best and most constructive way possible. So let me introduce our honored guest this evening. Jane Lockhart really needs no introduction. She's an icon of style and design in the world. Jane started her business more than 20 years ago. It's gone from success to success. She's won many, many design awards. She's appeared on many television shows. She has founded her own beautiful, or actually two beautiful lines of furniture, which you can have a look at on her website. She really needs no introduction, but Jane, let me say, welcome back. to QC design.
Hi, thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to come back. Thank you so much.
Well, that's just wonderful. Thank you. Now, tell me, Jane, in this sort of slightly different environment that we find ourselves in, what do you see for the design and decorating world? Where are we?
Well, right now, I'd say there's going to be a major change in how people think about their home, whether their home is a house or a condo. And probably one of the biggest changes is, believe it or not, even though we've really been through what I would call the last decade, the decade of home, I'm going to say the decade we're going into is really going to be the decade of home, as we really think about what home means to us. Right now, home has been pre-pandemic a place where we end up in the evening, or we drop our stuff, we change, we go back out again. But now home really encompasses so many parts of life that we used to kind of outsource. We go to the gym, we go to the coffee shop, we go somewhere to hang out with friends. But now we're really not doing that. We're finding that we're inside a lot more, which is going to change the dynamics of home. And I'll tell you something, Alex, this was already happening because demographics really shape design. It's just the pandemic has sped it up considerably.
That's so interesting, Jane. So when you say the demographics, are you talking about people like me, the older generation, wanting to be at home more? How does that work?
So the excellent generation that you are, yes, that is clearly part of it, but it's all generations in terms of how they utilize their space, and they use technology and other elements that are in their space. So ultimately, if you look at all the generations, the silent generation, which is a generation beyond you, they are people who are really very much in their house. And then we have baby boomers, who are people who are looking to, in a lot of ways, enlarge as opposed to downsize, which all the trends at one point said, oh no, baby boomers are going to want smaller homes. And that really hasn't been the case, because in a lot of cases, they've actually expanded their spaces in order to let other family members come and visit them, as opposed to them going to visit other people. On top of that, we're seeing across North America a desire for second locations. So you might have a main house, but you might have a condo elsewhere, or you may have two condos. So you sort of pick these other environments that you kind of want to use as a second jumping off point. Then we have, of course, and that's boomers, and we have millennials who are still looking for their first home, but they are now and it's very important in North America, particularly in the United States, they are the largest demographic of all the demographics, which means that they really push the market in terms of the directions because they have buying power. And it always comes down to money at some point. So what we're really seeing with them is, because they're such a large generation and they're just at the age now that they're starting to buy homes, we're really starting to see that change in the market. Then, of course, we have the Echo generation, which is the younger generation after them, who are really just finishing school, kind of getting it together and thinking about what they want to do. But that millennial and the boomer, Gen X is kind of in the middle, but they're the smallest. So they kind of have the least push in terms of financial power in the marketplace.
It's so interesting that you say that, Jane, because when you say demographics, I see my husband and myself actually illuminated in precisely what you say. We're stuck in the old family home, which has 4 bedrooms. We rattle around inside it. I'm anxious to be able to keep it so that grandchildren or whatever can come back to stay. And of course, 40 years down the road, we're looking to rework the way we use the house and the way it looks, so that we're not looking very dated and stale.
That's exactly right, Alex. So where people thought, oh, boomers are going to move to condos, unfortunately, builders haven't responded well to the boomer market in terms of condos. So although some may have large floor plates, they haven't really thought about, how do I get to that? You know, how's my parking managed? How are my amenities managed? Maybe I need a private elevator. Maybe I want a little more privacy, you know, in terms of getting in and out. Maybe I need sound privacy because I like to entertain and have a big screen TV and have my family over to watch the Super Bowl. Well, condo developers really haven't thought through that and how that's going to happen. So a lot of people like you have said, look, I'm going to keep my home. I'm going to live on the main floor. I don't necessarily have to go up and down. I could create a main floor bedroom if I have the opportunity. And I'll just keep the bedrooms for guest rooms when I need them, or I'll change the way it's laid out. So you're absolutely right. We're seeing this march towards renovation and decor based on demographics, and the pandemic has just simply made that way more obvious because we've had a lot of time to think about it and be like, what is going on? Well, it was already there. Now the band-aid's been ripped off and we're really seeing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear the take of a professional who's active out in the field, because of course all of this creates real opportunity for designers and decorators to get out and market their skills. I think perhaps linked to the pandemic, or as you say, perhaps it was part of the growing trend anyway, we're now seeing a huge rush where people want to increase the comfort. They want to be able to maybe hide away in their homes. I know a friend of mine called me this morning and I said to her, you know, what are you doing? She said, I'm lying on my recliner under my blanket.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big feel for that. How do you think in the industry we can use that to our advantage?
Well, you know, a lot of thoughts come into my head when you say that. We recently did our own little video on area carpets, and I thought, oh, area carpets, how exciting could that possibly be? Who is going to watch that? And it's one of the highest watched videos because I think it plays into exactly what you're talking about. As everyone has gone and done hardwood flooring, no problem. But that's not that comfortable. If you want to lie around on the floor, you want to watch TV, you want to entertain with kids on the floor, you're not going to do it right directly on the hardwood. So all of a sudden, it's opened up this category where people are like, well, how do I spec broadloom to be an area carpet? How do I know the size of area carpet? So things that we kind of take for granted in the business really are difficult for people to manage today. And that's where I think decorators, designers, stagers, anyone in the professional side of decor has an opportunity to not only educate themselves, but then to take that education and educate their clients and or audience to help them understand. And again, things that we think, oh, well, of course why wouldn't you know that? Lots of people don't know it. And that's where, to me, you know, that's opportunity.
That's so interesting. And of course, as I think from the point of view of students and the school, we try to tell them to market in the best way possible to new sectors of the marketplace. Your use of the example of carpets, for instance, and how people should apply is something that seems just to come naturally to you, but you know, I might really scratch my head over, and it's an opportunity for the professional to work in. What other kinds of elements of the home are people looking to really increase their levels of comfort in?
So comfort would definitely be bedrooms, furniture, anything where you're naturally interacting with that surface in terms of looking for it to perform that function. So understanding fabrics, qualities, fill in sofas, how mattresses are built. These are all things that people care a lot about. There's been a lot of recent information just about sleep and wellness. So I can tell you, people are going to be really on that now as we go into the winter months. So those kind of things are all part of comfort. And comfort doesn't just have to be tactile. It can also be visual, obviously, how to create visual comfort, but also sound comfort. And part of the issue with open concept these days is you really have very little management of sound, and learning how to deal with things like that to make it more livable. What can I do that not only blocks this person, but allows me to manage what it sounds like in that space? is going to become more and more important, especially if more people go into lockdown, or frankly, people just at home in open concept. How do I manage that?
Sound is so important, and it's something that people don't even think about. But you as a professional, when you go in somewhere, can so impress someone by saying, oh my goodness, I see a problem here. And
that's right.
To deal with it. So I couldn't agree more. What about, as we think about the whole use of color, Jane, that's also so important in terms of introducing a sense of quietude, a sense of peace and relaxation. How active has that sector of the marketplace been, and what should students do about enlarging that part of their practice?
So one of the things about color is very interesting is it's highly, how do I say, connected to trends. So what we've seen is a whole peak white is what I would call it, where everyone's been painting everything white, everything's white, it's great, mixed in with gray, lovely. The only problem with that is when you go into times when you do need comfort, and color is one of the easiest, fastest way to provide visual comfort as well as visual cues to people to find or to take comfort from that. So ways to do that is, first of all, if you're a student and you want to learn more about this, a lot of people discount colors as being kind of available to everyone knows it, and that's just simply not true. So number one is taking some time to learn paint color. Pick a brand that you want to know, you'd like to spec, learn that. Second of all, learn how those products, that particular company, translates in terms of sheen or finish on the wall or brand. I'll tell you, very few people know how to write a proper paint specification. And this is something that being able to say to a client, yeah, I know that needs to be eggshell, or I know that has to be washable, extremely important. So how that color is played out in a liquid form in the form of paint is very important. Understanding color in fibers. So do I know that colors are going to fade in certain fabrics? Is that something I should understand? So getting a basic understanding of what colors are color fast and what colors aren't. So these are technical pieces of information that you can call your sales rep or call a manufacturer that is usually pretty good at giving that information to you because they want you to spec their product. But also understanding the psychology around color, which again, there's a lot on the internet, and I would say some is good, some is not good. Because I find that when you...
Psychology.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, I shouldn't have interrupted, I'm sorry. Do
No,
you
no.
find the psychology of color can be a bit over the top, with people promising, you know, if you use pink and we pop you into a prison cell, you're going to feel great about it. I've seen that kind of argument, which makes me hesitate.
So I would agree with you. So my answer to anyone who asks me about this is to say, if it's a real thing, there'll be a real study attached to it. So there'll be real science. And that the pink that you're referring to is called Baker Miller pink. And it really was a study that was done in the 80s to see if color does actually play any effect on the visual cues that you and I see. Can it change our heart rate, or physiologically does it have an effect on us? So if it's something you're interested in, why not give it a shot? Now, for most people, they would say, well, if I like the color, I'm going to feel better. But that's just not always the case. Sometimes there are things that are intangible or hard to identify. And we need someone else who has the ability to kind of step back and say, you know, maybe this just isn't a good color. It's just like wearing certain colors. You put on certain colors and you feel good in them. I know that this is just off the top, but when I go running, because I'm a long distance runner, I do not like to wear red or pink because I feel more hot when I wear those colors. So it's the same kind of thing that I know it does not help my running. Let me be perfectly clear. But these are the kind of things that for some people, they do not look great in yellow. They may love yellow, but they have it in a room. And this is the thing. They have bright yellow walls in a bathroom and they're my coloring and it shows up all the purple under their eyes. But then they go in another room and it's peachy pinky and they're like, oh, you know, I look just a lot better in this. So those are the kind of things that design professionals should No, because that's how you add value to your client, and your client remembers stuff like that.
Oh, that's so for sure. And I think the other thing is that as a professional, you go in and say to a client, yes, look, this will work in this location, but guess what? You think this is the same color? It ain't gonna work.
That's right.
How do you communicate that to a client?
You can show them, and you have access to other tools that would give you the ability. For instance, sometimes when we try to demonstrate color differences, it's a lighting situation. So we'll look at a color inside, and then we'll always say, which is the old adage, go outside and look at it. That's no problem, except most people don't have outdoor lighting indoors. So you really want to tell a client, look, I want you to look at this morning, noon, and night in the environment in which you're going to use it. And again, this is information that only a design professional really has, because you hear the sort of armchair designers like, oh, you should look at that in natural light. That's great, unless you live in places like I live, which is very north. And as you know this, Alex, we have really 1 hour of natural daylight a year in the winter. So looking at it in natural daylight is useless to us. We need to look at the color at the time in which you are most using that space. So understanding the relationship in the environment with that color is what I'm paying my design professional to understand.
And I think that's such good value for money.
Mm-hmm.
Market yourself in that way, you're really giving quality. What about as well the other little thing which always trips people up, and that's when you bring home a paint sample that's that big and your client thinks that they're going to be able to decide what the color will look like. What do you say to that client?
Good luck. Again, your client is hiring you because they either don't trust themselves, they don't know how to do it, or they're completely overwhelmed and need some direction. So I always say to people, when it comes to paint colors, find a brand that you know and you trust how that color is going to look. So your ability to articulate how a color is going to look is what your client wants you to know. So there might be 20 great colors that you just know, I know this is going to look good, or I know this is going to look good. It pays to know that. So it's very hard to get a client to understand that something like this is not going to be how you read it on the wall. So you could also intervene for the client and talk to the painter directly and say, hey, will you do a sample for us? Sometimes they need you to take the lead for them because they're scared to talk to the painter. They don't want to create waves. And you just go in there and you're like, nope, that's what I do. I create the waves. I'm like, if the painter's mad, they can be mad at me. It's no problem. It's always the designer. That's okay. We're used to that. That's right. We carry the load. It's not a problem. But those are the kind of things that you can tell your client. I'm here to support you, and I'm going to make sure that the painter puts the right color on the wall at the right sheen. Understanding how sheen changes the color is very important. And you're able to communicate that to the client. So when they come to you with that paint chip, and let's say it's pink, you can say to the client, you do realize that this is going to turn out to be bright bubblegum pink. Is that what you wanted? And they'll say, no, I thought it was like more dusty. And they'll say, okay, I'm going to get you a more gray toned pink to get to what you want.
Give us an example, Jane, if you can think of one, just off the top, of a time when you've actually used psychology to steer a client. It's so important, of course, to take charge and to be the professional and have confidence in charge. But when have you actually used psychology to steer perhaps a client unwillingly towards a better choice than they would have made?
That's a really good question, actually. So for me, right off the bat, I can think of a client who said to me, I need to have a happy color. I need it happy. So I'm like, okay, give me an example of a happy color. And she said, well, yellow is a happy color. So I showed her a bunch of yellows. She's like, those are not happy yellows. Those are unhappy yellows. And I'm like, okay, gotta give me a little more of that. And this is what I think is where I was able to say to her, okay, so the color that you want is really, it's not so much about yellow, it's about the undertone. So for her, what she was seeing was anything that had a green in it, she was highly sensitive to, and that green was not happy for her. It was reminded her of where she came from. And for her, happier colors were colors with orange undertones, totally different direction. But in her head, when she thought of yellow, she thought of like the happy face, and that's what she was trying to communicate. So we were able to move the color in a different tone, which ultimately worked more in the, I want to say sunny yellows, but again, it's all conjecture. And this is the difficulty with color. It's really about language. And psychology is also about language in terms of how you interpret and then explain or convey those colors. So sometimes you really do have to keep asking questions and clients get tired of it at times, although no one gets tired of being asked about themselves. So never feel bad about asking, because they'll gladly talk about it. But drilling down to, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is this an example? Is this what you mean? So that you can get the right answer.
Boy, did you ever earn your money that time?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder now about, if we could just spend a moment, because in the last couple of days, I took a virtual tour of a magnificent Edwardian house in London. Is up for sale, offered by the homeowner, who is a stylist. And she had decorated the entire house in grays and beiges and creams and whites. It was very refined, very elegant. And then every now and then there would be this bang, a pop of disruptor color, a brilliant lime green. And it was always the same color. Of course, I didn't see it in real life, but it was quite shocking to see, and it had an enormous impact. What do you think of that kind of use of color and technique?
I think it's probably one of the best ways to get people to respond to color without really committing to color. And it's an easy way to refresh, but not to have to feel as though you've committed. And, for a lot of people, they remember or have seen pictures of colored appliances from the 70s, and then they probably grew up with them in the 80s and in the 90s and probably in the early 2000s. So for a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, we're not doing that again. Now that is changing. Definitely, again, Alex, I'll go back to our original point to say, there are now generations that are kind of like, oh, I'd like to see a little more color on more permanent things, but it's taken really 30 years to get to that. So there's always going to be people who say, I find it hard to live in a lot of color, but a little bit of an accent of color helps me get what I want without having it everywhere, which can be expensive to get out of.
Yeah, that's for sure. I found that lime green quite shocking and quite effective. It was really beautiful. We're kind of getting towards the end of the webinar, but I would really like just to ask you, Jane, as we're thinking about the larger picture of our world, if you were talking to a niece, say, or a cousin who was had just taken their education and was moving into the business of design, what would your best advice to them be as they're setting out now? Because I think that will be relevant to students.
I have a whole bunch here that I thought about this because I do feel this is really important. Number one, and I don't want to say take every job that comes along, but design is a category that you only get good at with experience. And as much as you can learn and you give them a great foundation, the experience comes from knowing your own thoughts on something, and you couldn't possibly learn every situation when you're in school. You have to kind of go through it. So number one, take the jobs that come and practice. That's why it's called an interior design or interior decorating practice. That's truly what people call it, because you're practicing every day and learning something new. So number one, take what comes your way. Number two, take pictures. Even if it's on your phone, learn how to take photography. It's an expensive proposition if you are taking photos all the time with a professional, unless it's what you do, but try to take pictures, because that's how people learn about you, and it gives you something to talk about. Because number three is to have a website or have presence on Instagram or whatever platform you wish to use. It's important that you establish you exist. And today, in my day, like you, Alex, there was no internet or web. you had business cards. Today, I laugh when people give me a business card. I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? I'm going to copy it in my phone anyway. So
Yeah.
you don't exist if you are not online digitally in some form. You choose whatever you want to do, but your client cannot find you if you are not there. Doesn't mean you can't have paper pictures, etc. But we validate our suppliers by how good their website is and how user-friendly. Did they understand it? So that is unfortunately the task that all of us in business today have to learn. So make sure you get that post. Tell people what you think. You know, if your thing is lime green and that's the color for you, you need to tell people that and they'll find you. Blogs are one of the best ways. As much as it's, again, do I have time to write a blog? No. Do I make the time? Yes, because I know that it's really a form of marketing.
You write wonderful blogs.
Thank you. It's because I have a lot of time on my hands because I spend a lot of time alone, which I have no problem with this. But it gives us the opportunity to really express how we feel and what we have to say. And that's really cool. And people find you because they search by keyword. So if there's something you want to identify yourself, make sure you put that in the blog. You know, if you have a hankering to talk about cabinet color, write about it because someone else is thinking it too. So make sure you do all of that. I have a bunch of stuff and I don't know how long I have here, but I'll just say the last thing is be flexible. So sometimes you end up changing your business direction because you don't think you're going to go that way, or you end up liking something more than you thought you were going to like. Don't be hard and fast. This is the time to learn and change to the market conditions. And that's what we do. I always think of myself as a Miata, not as a Cadillac. That I'm like, oh, I'm a little Miata. I can skirt in and out of traffic. I don't have to, that's right. I don't have to worry about being the Cadillac. Oh, I can't really, not that I don't like Cadillac, I love it. I'm just saying a big car. I can change directions a lot easier because I'm a small business. Whereas when you're a big business, is way harder. So we can do that.
Right. Those are all really excellent points. I hope people have been either scribbling them down or putting them straight on their computers. I think they'd really be interested to try to follow through on them. And Jane, you've given us so much terrific info here. I think it's been just wonderful. I look at my time and we have spent our full half hour. If you can stick around with us for another 10 15 minutes. I see there's quite a lot of questions come in. Perhaps we can encourage people to ask more questions and you can answer whatever we have time for. Just before we move into the questions, I think that Charlotte is going to throw up a little poll for students in which they can indicate the kinds of things that they're interested in, so that we can try to organize things in the future so that we reflect what their interests and needs are. And inquiries and students, attendees, while you're answering this little poll, let me just tell you about a terrific and exciting new feature of the school. We've just launched the QC Design School virtual classroom on Facebook.
Hello, everyone. It looks like we have lost Alex. Jane, I'll first ask, can you hear me clearly?
Yes. Yes,
okay,
I can hear you.
Excellent. Okay. Unfortunately, Alex's internet, it looks like it has gone down. So what Alex is going to say is that we have launched a virtual classroom. So that is very exciting. And I believe Charlotte is going to post the link for it. So that's fantastic. Okay, so what we'll do is get to the questions. So first off, we have, let's see, lots of them coming through. We have one from Heather, and she asks, what would you say is the quickest way to update a space in this time to bring harmony to a home?
Okay, right off the bat, and this can be as for everything, pillows. Number one is pillows. Okay. For any partner, Joanne, your husband's probably going to say this, no pillows. So number two, I would say another really great thing is try painting all your interior doors. This is actually a great way to add a little bit of color. It could be a neutral, it could be taupe or gray, whatever you want. It's a really nice way to ground the space and carry it all the way through. You don't have to do closet doors like I have behind me. It's going to stay as they are, but your main passage doors. Third thing is paint your front door black on the inside. It allows people to know that that is the main door, and it creates a statement in the house. Or do Tiffany blue, one or the other, it's the same.
Really? Okay, so those are actually pretty dramatic changes, but they're really interesting.
Paint.
Yeah, yeah, but that's really neat. I never would have thought to paint doors. I know I've noticed that a lot of people are switching out their hardware, so they're going from like more of the silver look to the black, which
that's a good one.
Completely transforms the space. Very cool. Really, really good ideas. Okay, let's see what's next here. We have a question from Jennifer, and she's asking, is there a book on the psychology of color that you'd recommend?
There are some really good books, actually. A few years ago, Benjamin Moore put out a book, paint company, called Color, and it was very good because they sort of analyzed it from more sort of practical terms, and it was pretty straightforward. You'd have to look that up to see if you could find it. The author was Leslie Harrington. It was very good. But there's other, there's a book called The Power of Color, and that was written a few years ago, and it was done with psychology all in mind. It's kind of a heavy book, but a lot of what you read today is actually from that book. So called The Power of Color. So that's a good one to read.
Okay, fantastic. We will write those down in the comments for everyone. Okay, I'm going to let Alex take over. And this is a lesson to everybody to have a backup plan. Okay.
I am so sorry, guys.
No worries.
Terribly away about the virtual classroom, and suddenly I was gone. Cut. Anyway, I'm glad to be back. So the virtual classroom on Facebook is a wonderful forum for people, and it's completely free of charge to all our students. And if you're interested in the school, we are allowing up to 3 weeks access to the classroom for other people. So let's move on. I don't know if Joanne and you, Jane, had actually looked at any of the questions. Were you answering them?
Joanne read some to me, so good. Carry on.
Okay, great. So one person asks, in these times of COVID, obviously people are quite concerned about virtual design and how to access clients in the best way possible. Is it possible to do a virtual consultation? As I say, we've just launched a course teaching people how to do it. But very well. Are you doing it? What is your feeling?
So yes, we had always tried to do virtual before, interestingly, and you know what happened is clients didn't want to pay for it because they're like, oh, well, you're just, talking to me over, it's not a real consultation. Well, the pandemic has changed that, and I'm glad it's changed it, because my answer to people is it does not matter what form I am providing the information to you in, whether it's via phone or via video, or I'm standing in front of you, it's still valuable information. And that's really hard sometimes for people to understand. Now, we always try to send out a form to people ahead of time and explain that to them, that you're paying for this no matter what. And I recommend saying that you've got to be upfront about what it costs and that your expertise is worth money. Very, very important. And if we don't all stick together and say that, then other people are going to devalue it. And remember, that's what you're selling, is you're selling information, you're selling knowledge. So you have to charge for that. So we do it online now, and we have very little problem with it because people accept it. And the only thing I will say is when I have then met a few people in person, they're much more chatty than they are when they're online, when they're a couple. And that's because the couple have trained each other not to talk over each other on Zoom, but then you meet them and they're constantly like this. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to take a long time. But anyway, sometimes you can't. That's right. They're in their best behavior when they're in Zoom. But the other thing is finding good pictures so I'll often talk to people on camera like this, but I'll be sending them, as I'm talking to them, photographs of what I'm referring to instead of trying to hold something up or whatever. But we've done lots of layout meetings, design meetings using present on the screen and walking people through floor plans. And in some ways it's almost better because their attention is fully focused on it. So it's actually pretty good.
We found it a very efficient way of working.
Yes.
Now, Becky, who's an attendee on the webinar this evening, has got a question about what sort of elements for business would you give people to, and what are the best resources for someone who's starting out in small business?
This is a tough one because it doesn't matter how good you are at design. If you don't know how to do business, it is irrelevant. So that's what I always tell people who start with me, to say, you're not artists, you're in this to make money and you have to run a business. So you have to have two sides of your brain. You're going to have that creative side, but you also have to have that business side. So resources are always good to go online and read other designers' blogs. We read them. I'm over 25 years in this, and you can always learn something. Taking classes like this, look, you're always going to learn design because you're interested in it and you can absorb it quickly. What you don't want to learn, and most designers are the same, is they're really not that interested in learning the business. So it's important to take courses with QC like this to learn the business side. If you have trouble with it, hire someone to do it for you, hire someone to manage the money. I remember when I first started, honestly, 25 years ago, and I would look at the invoice because I'd write my own invoices and I'd be like, well, that's outrageous. Who would pay that? That's crazy. So I learned, I'm like, this is not for me. So I need someone else to write the invoice for me. So you hire someone, and that's where going to a school like this is a good opportunity to either meet other people who are good at that or to recognize that's not your strength. So you do need help. And all businesses have a good second, it's not always this, you may have one face, but there's a whole bunch of people that make that happen. You can also look at online, there's pretty decent small business books that you can get from the government. The Canadian government will put out information about the HST, how to manage all of that. So those are good places to get some information. And if someone's been in business longer than you, ask to mentor them. It is very helpful.
Right. And it's not all fun and games and beautiful choosing of colors and fabrics, of course. What about dealing with a really ratty client who's being nasty to you? How do you deal with that?
Well, let me see. If I haven't murdered them, then we can't. No, okay. Obviously, we can't murder people because that cuts down on repeat business. First of all, I'm going to say that this is the hardest thing, other than getting money out of people. But sometimes people are just mean. Like that, there's just no accounting for them. And every now and then, we will come across people who just. They really want to scream at the cable guy, but they can't get someone on the phone. If the phone person picked up, they'd yell at the phone person, but you're the available person. And it's not fair, but it happens. So you have the right to create boundaries, and you have the right to say to someone calmly, please don't speak to me like that. Or maybe this relationship is not a good relationship. And I think the hardest thing in business, especially in a small business, when you're eager to do a good job and you want to please, which most design professionals want to please their client, sometimes that client's money is not worth it. Not the person, but the money. And if it doesn't fit you, your values, how you do things, you can always find someone else. And it's hard to believe that, but the truth is, poor clients cost you money in the long run. And it's easier, as much as it hurts in the beginning, to say, this isn't going to work. Or if it's hard to say that, be really expensive or really busy. because it isn't going to get better if you're just feeling like, oh, we're not connecting. And that happens in every business. You know, you can see that when you read business reviews of any company, there's always someone mad. So I'm always shocked that anyone could be mad at us, but such is life. So you have to make the best of it. And we try very, 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 very hard to be pleasant, no matter what. Even if I want to scream, I still always write a nice email.
You can always go and chat about them afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jane, I think we have to end here. It's been a fascinating 3/4 of an hour. I'm so pleased, but our webinar time is coming to an end. We can have you back very soon. We wish you very well, and we are so thankful for your friendship and your relationship with us. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Can I just say how great you are? There's a lot of online people, but first of all, you're lovely, and that matters. And you care that people get educated well. And those are part of my values, and I feel the same way. And I just think that if people want to do this, they should do it and start here. You already have a great format. You're not figuring it out, which is half the battle. So thank you for including me in your wonderful circle of friends.
That's just lovely, Jane. Thank you so much. And all of you out there, as I say, I wish I could give you all a real cup of coffee in my kitchen this evening, but I guess I can't. Do, if you're interested, take us up on the special promotions that came along with this webinar. Speak to everyone at the support team. We'll do our very, very best for you all. Wish you all very well, and we'll hope to speak soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.